those who have joined us for the California State Preschool Program Expansion Funds for Fiscal Year 2017-18 Request for Applications webinar. This fund opportunity is open to both local education agencies and non-local education agencies. CAs are school districts, county offices of education, community college districts, or direct funded charter schools. Non-CAs are community-based organizations that may or may not currently provide child care services. This is a webinar where we will go over the application. My name is Joycelyn Ward Richardson. I am a Child Development Consultant with the California Department of Education, Early Education and Support Division, Field Services Office, the CSPP Expansion Team. We are my colleagues Maria Amore from Funding and Agency Support Unit, Joe Blett and Kimmy Conover from Fiscal Services, and Fabio Flores from Contracts. We get started this morning by talking about the history of the California State Preschool Program and going over some definitions of the CSPP. The State Preschool Program was established in 1965. It provides eligible families with age-eligible 3- and 4-year-old children with CSPP services in a safe, healthy, age-appropriate, and quality educational environment. CSPP definitions. CSPP age-eligible definitions. Children, 3-year children are children who have their 3rd birthday on or before September 1st of the fiscal year they are being served. 4 children are children who will have their 4th birthday on or before September 1st of the fiscal year they are being served. They must meet eligibility and need criteria described in the California Code of Regulations, 5 CR, Section 18078. Again, the definitions for the local education agencies, or LEAs, are school districts, county offices of education, community college districts, or direct funded charter schools. Non-LEAs are nonprofit agencies, recognized tribal entities, or community-based organizations. Now begin with an overview of this request for application. CSPP expansion funds are now available to provide subsidized early education services to age-eligible 3- and 4-year-old children and eligible families. Funding is available. There is $95 million for local education agency applicants and Part Day, Part Year non-LEA applicants providing services on or after April 1st, 2018. Priorities are as follows. LEA applicants providing full-day, full-year services, LEA applicants providing part-day, part-year services, LEA applicants providing part-day, part-year services. And there is an additional $8 million will be available to non-LEAs providing full-day, full-year CSPP services on or after July 1st, 2018.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Priorities by Local Planning Council, LCC priorities with each county. By order scores for eligible applications. County funds allocated to counties will be redistributed to successful unfunded applicants in priority order as stated. Full-day, full-year applicants will be funded before part-day, part-year applicants. The Education Code, Ed Code Title I, Division I, Part 6, Chapter 2, Sections 235 through 237, authorizes the Superintendent of Public Instruction to administer CSPP. California Code of Regulations 5 CCR, Education Code Chapter 19, Section 18001 through 18003 provides general provisions for awarding funding. Applicants must adhere to Ed Code and CCR, which are integrated into the funding terms and conditions, TNC, and CSPP program requirements. Apple laws and regulations also include CDE Audit Guide and the Child Care Development Fund, CCF, at 45 Code of Federal Regulations, 46 CFR, Part 8, Federal Register, Volume 72, Number 142, July 24, 1998, and all other federal regulatory requirements listed on page 4 of the CSPP Request for Applications Program Overview. CCR Section 18272 requires each agency as part of the desired results system to maintain a developmental profile that identifies the emotional, social, physical, linguistic, and cognitive growth of each child served, and the profile plan and conduct age developmentally appropriate activities. The link provided below. The Department of Education monitors each contractor's administrative performance in accordance with Education Code 8261 and 5 CCR Section 18279, utilizing the annual contractor self-review, self-evaluation, federal program monitoring, and compliance monitoring review. Link is provided for you below. External reviews. Contractors must submit an annual financial and compliance audit to the CE Audits and Investigations Division, Education Code 8448G. The link is provided below. CD will conduct program reviews periodically using the appropriate review instrument. That is provided below. Application timelines. Request for applications released on November 9, 2017. Webinar on November 16, 2017. Applications due to the ESC on December 19, 2017. Score notifications to applicants on February the 2nd, 2018. Due to CDE on February 21st, 2018. Award announced on March 8, 2018. Contract issued on April 1st, 2018. Non-DA, full-day, full-year applicants may begin providing CSPP services on or after July 1st, 2018. Are subject to change. The RE funding opportunity is available to existing CSPP contractors, early education and support division program contractors that do not have a CSPP contract, new agencies without EESC program contracts. To be eligible, applicants must be licensed or eligible for licensing through community care licensing. Applicants without a license will not be issued a contract until issued a license. Current applicants must be in compliance with Title 22 California Code of Regulations. Exam licensing in accordance with Health and Safety Code Section 1596.792. Register with Secretary of State to do business in California or possess a valid California business license. Exception. Entities, LEAs, recognized tribal entities, local government, etc. Applicants that have provided child care and development services in the service delivery area for at least 3 years immediately preceding the posting date of this RFA, or applicants that have their primary administrative offices for the child development program in the service delivery area. Current EESD contractors are eligible to apply except when more of the following conditions apply. CCR Section 18001. Contractor is on a conditional status. The contractor failed to clear identified non-compliance items within 12 months of the review. CE reduced the contractor's current year maximum reimbursement amount. Applicant contractor has an outstanding accounts receivable balance. ESD contractors are eligible to apply except when one or more of the following conditions apply. CCR Section 18001. Applicant contractor has a delinquent audit with the CDE. Contractor employs or plans to employ a person in a position of financial responsibility or control has been convicted of a crime involving misuse or misappropriation of state or federal funds, or federal crime involving moral turpitude. Education Section 8406.9. An applicant that is not a current EESD contractor is eligible to apply for funding when one or more of the following conditions apply. CCR Section 18001. The applicant had previous contracts with the CDE that were terminated or not continued for fiscal or programmatic noncompliance within the 3 years immediately preceding the date the RFA was posted. An applicant that is not a current EESD contractor is eligible to apply for funding except when one or more of the following conditions apply. CCR Section 18001. The applicant employs or plans to employ a person in a position of financial responsibility or control who has been convicted of a crime involving misuse or misappropriation of state or federal funds, state or federal crime involving moral turpitude. Education Code Section 8406.9. Application submission. Applications must be received at or before 5 p.m. on November 19, 2017 at the following address: County Department of Education, Early Education and Support Division, Pension, Funding and Agency Support Unit, 1830 N Street, 3410, Sec, California, 95814-5901. Applicants for funding must be completed in accordance with the following instructions. Application must demonstrate the applicant's working knowledge of state and federal early education requirements. Applicant must submit all required information and forms requested in the RFA. Applicants must conform to the format requirements, for example, in Section 10 of RFA instructions. Paper size, margin, and font size. CSPP application cover sheet must include as the first page for the entire application. Do not attach additional covers or place application in binders. Applications must be adequately secured with a staple in the upper left-hand corner. Failure to submit the application on a timely basis may result in the disqualification of the application. Preparing application. Applicant accepts full responsibility for all costs incurred in the development of this application. These Costs are not reimbursable, even if the agency is awarded funds through this RFA. Number of copies required. 1 application with original signature, blue ink, by the agency's authorized agent in all sections. Agent signature, for example. Copies of the entire original application. Application due date. Applications must be received by 5 p.m. on December 19, 2017. Posts will not be accepted. Applications that do not adhere to submission requirements may be disqualified. Information can be found on page 11 in the RFA Program Overview. Screening criteria. Applications must be received by the due date. Include all required signatures, appropriate number of copies, eligible for funding pursuant to 5 CCR, Section 18001. Preliminary screening. The applicant's eligibility for funding and adherence to submission requirements will be verified. Qualified applicants will be notified in writing. Applications will be moved forward for evaluation and scoring. Information can be found on page 12 in the RFA Program Overview. Evaluation and scoring. Eligible applicants will be evaluated and scored. Scores are based solely on the program narrative, section of application. Applicants must obtain a minimum score of 80 points, of 114 maximum points. The CDE will notify all applicants in writing of their score. Information can be found on page 12 in the RFA Program Overview. Process. After receiving the written notification, the applicant should review their application. You may request a copy of the criteria used to score and any reader's comments. And wishing to appeal their score must submit a notice of appeal to the CDE within 10 business days of receiving results notification. Information can be found on page 13 in the RFA Program Overview. Results. Final awards will be announced as follows. Successful applicants will receive a proposed award letter. Final awards will be posted on CDE's website at the link provided below. I will now turn over the presentation back to Joyce Lynn, who will discuss the program narrative of the RFA.
We will now move on to Section 10, the program attachment and the program narrative. As we're preparing your program narrative, we want you to keep in mind Ed Code Section 8203, with characteristics of a high-quality early education environment. Characteristics are age-appropriate physical environments that meet applicable licensing standards and desired results system requirements. Settings offering adult-to-child ratios, encouraging the best opportunities for development with low staff turnover. Appropriate program activities and services that meet the developmental needs of each child. Program activities, learning materials, teaching methods, and services that meet the cultural and linguistic needs of the children and families. Opportunities promoting children's success in school, education, family and community involvement, effective program administration, and provision for the nutritional needs of children. Social and health services, including identification of children and family needs and referral to appropriate agencies according to their needs, possessing the appropriate and required qualifications and experience, and select the diverse linguistic and cultural makeup of the children and families enrolled in the program. Our staffing requirements. Teachers must have a valid associate teacher permit or higher issued by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Site supervisors may only supervise one site and must have a valid site supervisor permit also issued by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Specific information on permit requirements is located at the link provided below. Program directors may supervise multiple sites and must have a valid program director permit issued by CTC. Again, specific information on permit requirements is located at the link below. Continuing with staffing requirements. Contractors must comply with the staffing ratio requirements specified in Title V, 5 CCR, Section 18290. CCR requirements are more stringent than community care licensing Title 22 requirements. So let's take a look at the Title V requirements for staffing. 5 defines preschool as 36 months to enrollment in kindergarten, and it's the same for the CSPP program. Adult-to-child ratio for preschool is 1 adult for every 8 children. However, the teacher-to-child ratio, which is a minimum of an associate teacher permit, is 1 to 24. There needs to be at least 1 teacher for every 24 children. So in that 24 children, the ratio is 1 to 8, which means for a classroom with 24 children, you will need 3 adults. One of those 3 adults must be a teacher. Under preschool, 3 and 4-year-olds are defined in the CSPP standards that we discussed earlier in this presentation. And again, for CSPP, the ratios are the same, 1 to 8, and the teacher-child ratio is 1 to 2. We will now move on to the desired results system. The desired results system. Carrying designs the desired results system to measure child progress toward 6 desired developmental outcomes. The result defines an overall outcome in a developmental area or domain. Desired results for children and families is a system designed to improve the quality of programs and services. 6 desired outcomes. Children are personally and socially competent. Children are effective learners. 3, children show physical and motor competence. 4, children are safe and healthy. 5, families support children's learning and development. And 6, family achieves their goals. The desired results developmental profile domains are approaches to learning and self-regulation, social and emotional development, language and literacy development, language development, cognition, including math and science, physical development and health, history, social science, visual and performing arts. The DISO system, or California's Early Learning and Development System, is comprised of the preschool program guidelines, the curriculum framework, preschool learning foundations, professional development and support and competencies, and the desired results assessment system. The DP aligns with the California Infant Toddler Learning and Development Foundation, the California Preschool Learning Foundation, and the Common Core State Standards. We went into the 4 components of the desired results system. It is the desired results developmental profile, desired results parent survey, the desired results environment rating scale, or the early childhood environment rating scale, or the ECHRS, and program self-evaluation, the PSE. More information about training regarding the desired results system can be found at the link provided below. Completing Section 10. Follow instructions carefully for Section 10, narrative for completing the RFA. Applicants must complete a written narrative for program components 1 through 5. You must adhere to the page limitations, paper size, font type and size, and line per inch limits described on pages 13 through 18 of RFA instructions. This is the only section of the RFA that is scored. Demonstrate how your program will meet the educational needs of children and families. It must align with the scoring rubric. Section 10. 5 components to the program narrative: the agency philosophy and introduction, and children and family components. These components are not scored. The components are scored. Administration, meeting the developmental needs of children, parents, and community partnerships. Component 1, agency philosophy and introduction, provides a general overview of the agency's early education and development services for children and families. How are services delivered? When are services delivered? What services are provided? Are special programs utilized? What is the program's philosophy? And are there any unique features used? Example, the Preschool program is located in Vibrant Valley, California, a primarily Hispanic and Asian community. Vibrant Valley is a primarily agriculture and service industry economy with an unemployment rate of 20%. In Vibrant Valley, California, 20% of the population with children under the age of 5 falls at or below the 70th percentile on the state median income. With CSPP program services for eligible 3- and 4-year-old children from 6 o'clock a.m. till 6 o'clock p.m., Monday through Friday. We provide children with nutritious meals and snacks. Here's the example. The Perfect Preschool program offers a developmentally appropriate early childhood education program that meets the needs of the whole child and encourages the power of play. We use XYZ curriculum, which respects both the age and the individual needs of each child. In addition, the XYZ curriculum aligns with the California Preschool Curriculum Framework. Next example. We use community collaboration and invite community members into the classroom to enhance our educational curriculum and to create important partnerships to further our hands-on education for children and parents. Component 2, children and families. Describe who will be served, the demographics, the ethnicity, economic level, languages spoken, time work in the service area, and any special needs of families served. How the hours and days of operation meet the needs of children and families in the community. Example, according to the latest census data from 2010, the Vibrant Valley population of 37,000 people is comprised of 60% Hispanic, 30% Asian, and the remaining 10% various ethnicities. Primary languages spoken are English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. Our families work as farm laborers. Vibrant Valley's top industry is agriculture. Also work in the service industry and often work multiple jobs. Our CSPP service delivery hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. assist those parents working extended hours and multiple jobs, especially during the harvest season. Component 3, 4, and 5 are the scored components. So component 3 is your program description, your agency's strategic plan for the CSPP contract. The strategic plan is used to communicate the organization's goals, the action steps that will be taken to achieve those goals, and assessment process that will be used to determine if goals and action steps have been met. The areas to be included in your strategic plan are 1, learning activities and program design. 2, recruitment and retention of qualified staff. Staff development. 4, facilities management. And for each area, including in your strategic plan, you must include 1 goal, 3 action steps or an objective for each goal, and method for assessing progress and success. Goals are broad and comprehensive statements that describe what the agency is going to accomplish. Written goals provide a picture of the agency's plan to build and sustain a high-quality developmental program for children and support their families. These are the action steps: the how, the who, and the when. So, comprehensive description of each step that is planned to reach the goal. Action steps include how the action steps will be taken, who will be responsible for completing the action steps, times and due dates for the action steps. The assessment is used to determine that the goals have been met. The assessment process should include how will success be determined or measured, who involved in the assessment process, when will the assessment be completed, how will the agency use the results of the assessment for future growth and development. Include 1 goal for each of the following: learning activity and program design, recruitment and retention of qualified staff, staff development and professional learning, and facilities management. I'm going to provide an example for area 3, which is staff development, professional learning. The goal is reflecting on current trends, research, and best practice. Staff provided with comprehensive, relevant, and ongoing professional learning opportunities to enhance the quality of services for children and families. The objectives are the action steps. First one is by August 30th, 2017. The program director will develop and distribute a staff survey on professional learning needs. Based on the results of the survey, an annual training calendar will be created. Number 2, 2 mandatory in-service training days will be planned by the program director. 1 fall as a pre-service and 1 in the spring. To include an overview of the DRDP and ECHRS tools, curriculum development, and other relevant topics that were highlighted in the staff survey. 3, the Human Resource Department will facilitate new employee orientation with all staff within 30 days of employment. New employee orientation will include the agency's mission, goals, and agency system. So the assessment for this goal. Evaluations will be utilized to determine training effectiveness and future training needs. The second, professional learning calendar will be developed, distributed to staff, and implemented. Component 4 meets the developmental needs of children. It includes 3 parts: 4A, the written narrative; 4B, the weekly activity plan; and 4C, the weekly menu plan. 4A, the written narrative. Provide a written narrative for services that will be provided by the contract. It must demonstrate a comprehensive and clearly defined rationale, which is aligned to the scoring rubric, for the selection of curricular activities to support children's developmental growth in each of the 8 DRDP 2015 domains listed below. Approaches to learning and self-regulation. 2, language and literacy development. 3, social and emotional development. 4, English language development. 5, cognition, including math and science. 6, physical development and health. 7, history and social science. 8, visual and performing arts. B, weekly activity plan. Complete Form G, which can be found at the link provided below. Create a weekly activity plan for one class of children for the last week of September. The weekly activity plan shall establish learning objectives and create and incorporate experience-based learning activities. State how the identified strategies and curriculum are delivered to children and families to achieve the desired results. Create activities that are age and linguistically appropriate and be culturally supported. Additionally, the weekly activity plan shall accommodate variations in rates of development of children and shall demonstrate the individualization and diverse learning styles and abilities of each child. The weekly activity plan should be comprehensive, integrated, and experience-based and include nutrition education activities. C, the weekly menu plan. Complete Form H, which can be found at the link provided below. The weekly plan shall provide a description of the meal service, setting, and interaction. Take food items and portions for each snack or meal. Meal snacks shall be culturally and developmentally appropriate and meet the Federal Child and Adult Care Food Program or the National School Nutrition Program standards. Component 5, parent and community partnerships shall describe in detail how the agency plans to, 1, assess parent interests, needs, and available community resources. 2, develop and maintain strategic partnerships between community resources, community resource providers, parent and agency to provide critical ongoing communication, educational activities, and referrals for services for parents and children. Establish ongoing partnerships between preschool and kindergarten staff to ensure information on kindergarten readiness is provided to children and parents, include joint educational opportunities, visits, and kindergarten orientation activities. Here's an example of the scoring rubric that will be used for this section. Again, you must align your responses to this rubric when completing your written narrative, which can be found at the link provided below. And there are some resources, applicant resources for you to assist you in completing Section 10 of the application. I will turn the presentation over to Fabio Flores from the CDE Contracts Division.
Good morning. My name is Fabio Flores, and I will be presenting on the contracts portion of this webinar. Contract information. Contracts are legally binding between the CDE and the public or private agency. Contracts are generally effective for a fiscal year. Contracts have no vested right to a subsequent contract. Referring to the funding terms and conditions, FT&C, and/or program requirements will be the best resource for questions regarding the operation of your program. Year 2017-18, FT&C and program requirements can be found on the CDE's website at the below. The contract package will be emailed to the Executive Director and Program Director identified in the application cover sheet. The package includes contract face sheet, directions for child care and development contracts, documentation for child care and development contracts, documentation checklist, contract certification clauses, federal certifications if there's federal funding, California Civil Rights Law certification, a sample resolution for agencies requiring board approval. To receive a proposed award letter will be contacted by CDFS for contract negotiation, receive a CSPP contract or amendment, complete the requirements for contract execution. No apportionments can be made until a contract is deemed executed by the contracts office. By authorized designee. Original signatures in blue ink, no stamps. All forms must be completed. Public agencies are required to provide a board resolution authorizing the contract. A example resolution will be provided. Mail copies of the completed package back to the CDE. Are permitted to contract portions of their contract to another agency only as permitted by the Education Code, 5 CCR, and FTNC, and with prior approval of the CDE. Once approved to subcontract, the applicant agency remains responsible for ensuring compliance with all administrative, project, and fiscal requirements. Information and requirements on subcontracting can be found on page 5 of the RFA program overview. Applicants may apply for CSPP funding to operate via a FCC ATN, also known as FETCHN. EduCode defines FETCHN as entities organized under law to operate FETCHN that support educational objectives for children in licensed family child care homes. Applicants proposing to provide CSPP services via a FETCHN are responsible for administrative, programmatic, contract, and fiscal compliance for Ed Code Section 8246, requiring but not limited to staff qualifications, staff ratios, maintaining programmatic and fiscal compliance with CSPP program requirements, recruiting, training, and reimbursing life family home providers, collecting family fees, assuring a developmental profile is completed for each child, ensuring basic health and nutrition requirements are met, providing data and reporting contract requirements, recruiting, enrolling, and certifying eligible families, Information and requirements on operating a FETCHN can be found on page 5 of the RFA program overview. For the award, questions regarding contracts, required forms, etc., can be directed to the email address below. I'll turn the presentation over to Joe Sublett and Timmy Conover from Child Development and Nutrition Fiscal Services.
Good morning. My name is Joe Sublett, and I'm going to be presenting the fiscal portion of the webinar along with my colleague, Timmy Conover. This then is designed to assist you in completing the fiscal forms for this RFA. But before we get into the fiscal forms, I'd like to go over some definitions. Enrollment is the total of every child's enrollment for the days the contractor is open to provide services. For each child depends on certified need and is reflected on the notice of action. Note, a child can be enrolled full-time on one day and part-time on another based upon eligibility. The day of operation is the day the contractor provides services for one or more enrolled certified child. A child is one who is funded through the CSPP program. Days of operation, or MDO, are the number of days the contractor is obligated to serve certified children. This is based on the service calendar that is submitted by the LEA or non-LEA contractor of this RFA. Staff training days where no certified children are served do not count as days of operation. For these contractors, service at any one site is reported as a day of operation. Education Code Sections 8265.5 and 8260.1 provides for adjustment factors to reflect the additional expense of serving children who meet specified criteria. Adjustment factors change or convert actual enrollment to adjusted days of enrollment. This is important because it affects the amount you will be reimbursed per child. There are two reasons for adjustment factors. Number 1, time base of child, for example, full day or part day, and number 2, special criteria. So let's view the details for adjustment factors for time base. Time plus is for services provided for 10.5 hours or more, and the adjustment factor is 1.18. Full time is for services provided for 6.5 hours to under 10.5 hours. The adjustment factor is 1. First time is for services provided for 4 hours to under 6.5 hours. The adjustment factor is 0.75. And 1/2 time is for services provided for under 4 hours. Adjustment factor is 0.6193. Please, if you are applying for Part A, Part Year funding, there are no adjustment factors. It is all .6193. The reason for adjustment factors are special criteria. Special criteria factors recognize that children, infants, severely disabled, etc., have different needs, and the costs associated with providing services may vary. A couple notes regarding adjustment factors. Enrollment shall not be reported in more than one category. For example, a child cannot be reported in both the 3- and 4-year-old category and has exceptional needs. This is double reporting. And adjustment factors do not increase contractor's maximum reimbursable amount, or MRA. Now, on through some definitions, let's review an example of a form that has been filled out. Remember, this is only an example, and you will complete your forms with information appropriate for your agency. Also, we will only be reviewing the full-day, full-year forms today, but if you are applying for Part A, Part Year, you will need to submit Part A, Part Year forms. Please, the Excel forms have been updated for this RFA. And a note about Worksheet A1 is that you will need to complete this form for each full-day, full-year site. Similarly, you will need to complete a Part A, Part Year worksheet for each site for which you are applying for funding. So be sure to create a copy and fill out Worksheet A1 for each site for which you're applying funding. Instructions for creating a copy are on the top of the form in Part 1. There are 3 parts to Worksheet A1, and we have zoomed in on Parts 1 and 2 on this slide for ease of review. If you have previously applied for funding last year, you will notice that we have changed the highlighted fields. You will need to complete all highlighted fields applicable to your agency. In Part 1, you will enter basic site information, including the name, the county, site address, number of classrooms, license number, license type, and license capacity. For Worksheet A1, we're looking at ABC Childcare, site information for the Azalea Center. For Part 2, you will enter the number of children you plan to serve per day under the appropriate time-based or total criteria. Here, too, in the first section, it lists the 3- and 4-year-olds category, which is the time-based section. And that is the special criteria section, which include exceptional needs, limited and non-English proficient, CP are at risk of abuse or neglect, and severely disabled. You will enter the number of children you plan to serve per day under the appropriate time-based or special criteria. Once data is entered, the Excel worksheet will multiply the number of children by the adjustment factor to get the adjusted certified enrollment. As you can see in our example, once you have entered the information here in the yellow highlighted area for the children, it will auto-populate the cells to the right. Our example here shows you the calculation in several categories. We have 6 full-time plus children multiplied the adjustment factor of 1.18 to arrive at 7.0800. Full-time children times the adjustment factor of 1 is 10. For 3/4 time, we have 2 children times the adjustment factor of 0.75 equals 1.5. And half-time children, we have 2 multiplied by the adjustment factor of 0.6193 equals 1.2386. In our example, we have also entered some data for the limited and non-English proficient category as well. The Excel worksheet will calculate and auto-populate for you. So down here at the bottom, in line 1, the total certified children per day is 31 at the Azalea Center. At the bottom, line 2, the total adjusted child days of enrollment per day is 31.2839. So now let's review Part 3. This is still Worksheet A1. It is just the bottom portion of the form. And then the only line you will need to enter, again highlighted in yellow, is the date of operation in line 3. This corresponds to your full year calendar that you submit with this RFA. Once you're at the days of operation, the remaining cells will calculate and auto-populate in this section. So as you see in line 2, the 31.2839 we just arrived at from Part 2 is the total adjusted child days of enrollment per day. In our example, 249 is the total days of operation entered in line 3. When 2 is multiplied by line 3, the result is line 4. The total annual adjusted child days of enrollment, which equals 7789.611. 4 is then multiplied by the daily rate of $45.73 to arrive at line 6. The total funds requested amount for this site of $356,223. Let's review another example. Here's another full day, full year form. In the example below, we have all the parts of the form represented, so parts 1, 2, and 3. What we bring to your attention here is that we've created a sample for a different site. Remember, if you are requesting funds for more than one site, you must fill out worksheet A1 for each site. Again, in part 1, we have the site-specific information. For this example, we've used the Marigold Center as site. Here in part 2, you need to include the number of kids you plan to serve per day in the appropriate categories. Example, line 1, total certified children per day is 35 for this case. Line 2, the total adjusted child days of enrollment per day is 34.0895 for this site. And for 3 at the bottom, again, you only need to enter the total days of operation in line 3. So we have 249 days in our example. And that figure multiplied by the total adjusted child days of enrollment per day of 34.0895 equals 8488.2855 in line 4, the total annual adjusted child days of enrollment. Once 4 is multiplied by the daily rate of $45.73 in line 5, we have the funds requested of $388,169 in line 6 for one site. The next form we're going to look at is the worksheet A2. This is a full day, full year, non-certified enrollment information total for all full day, full year, non-certified sites. So just clarify, certified children are those paid for with CSPP funds, and non-certified children are paid for with another funding source, such as a private pay parent. The funds you are requesting are for certified children, but we will review the data for the non-certified children you plan to serve as it affects the calculation. I'll show you how that works once we get to the budget pages. This form has not been changed from our previous RFAs. What is really important to note, and we had this question last year, is that if you plan to serve non-certified children, you will need to enter the total for all the non-certified children on this form for all sites. This is a summary form. Data on this form will also populate to the budget pages. Please ensure you are using this as a summary for all your sites. What we entered here in our example is 37 full-time children. 57 would represent both the Marigold and the Azalea sites that we were showing in our example. Form I will go over with you is the worksheet A3. This is the full day, full year site summary information page. What you have to do for this summary page is enter the information from each of your A1 worksheets. Again, highlighted fields will need to be completed by your agency. The first we'll enter on this form is the proposed program start date. This must match the start date entered on your calendar. In our example here, we have July 1st, 2018. The name you need to enter is the proposed days of operation from your full day, full year calendar. Again, we've used 249 that we have used in our previous form. And what you're going to do is enter your site information. So for site 1, we've got the Azalea Center, and site number 2, the Marigold Center. You're going to pick up this information from your A1 worksheet. For the Azalea Center, we have the total certified children per day from worksheet A1. Line 1 as 30 children. For the Gold Center, it was 35 children. Its column, the total adjusted child days of enrollment per day from worksheet A2, line 2 for the Azalea Center, it was 31.2839. And for the Gold Center, it was 34.0895. Once you enter that data, the rest of the form will calculate and auto-populate for you. The Azalea Center has total annual adjusted child days of enrollment here in the next column, the 7789.611. And our Gold Center has the annual adjusted child days of enrollment of 8488.2855. Now, both those have the total funds requested amount of $356,223 and $388,169, respectively. Those two amounts should match what you have just completed on your A1 worksheet. One of the important things I want to remind you about is that you absolutely need to put in the proposed days of operation on this form. If that's not entered, the form will not calculate correctly. So if it seems to not look correct, make sure you're putting in your days of operation, and that should help this form. If you have 1 site or 10 sites, you must list each site here. Very important, because when we get to the grand totals, that information will populate the budget pages, which we go over. See at the bottom, the total funds requested for both sites is $144,392. Now I'm going to go over some more definitions for you as we're getting towards the budget pages. Expenses. Child development expenditures are reported in accordance with the California School Accounting Manual, which classifies expenditures according to the types of items purchased or services obtained. Expenditures are categorized into the following object codes. 1,000, certificate salaries. 2,000, classified salaries. 3,000, employee benefits. 4,000, books and supplies. 5,000, services and other operating expenses. 60,000, new equipment. And 65,000, equipment replacement. Viewing a little closer, the following expenses are all listed in the order they appear on the budget form. First, certificated salaries are categories 1,000 and are salaries paid to employees with a development permit, teaching credential, or other appropriate certificate. Classified salaries, category 2,000, are all other salaries that are not certificated. Examples of classified salaries are as follows. Category 2,100 are salaries paid to instructional aides who are required to perform any portion of their duty under the supervision of a classroom teacher or special education resource specialist teacher. Education Code Section 41011. Category 2,200 are salaries paid to instructional media and libraries, student support, pupil transportation, food services, and maintenance and operations functions. Category 2,300 are salaries paid to supervisory personnel who are business managers, controllers, directors, chief accountants, accounting supervisors, purchase agents, administrators, superintendents, and assistant superintendents. 2,400 are salaries paid to clerks, secretaries, accountants, bookkeepers, programmers, and computer technical support, lean and computer operators, and others in similar positions. We have employee benefits in category 3,000, which employers' contributions, retirement plans, and health and welfare benefits. Books and supplies are category 4,000, which is expenditures for books and supplies, including cost of sales and use tax, freight, and handling charges. The food for meals and snacks would also be considered a supply. Services and other operating expenses is category 5,000. On the form, this will be a total of lines 5A, B, C, D, E, and F, and are itemized as follows. 5A, expenditures for rentals or leases. 5B, service contracts, includes janitorial, consultant, auditor, maintenance contracts, etc. 5B, nutrition, expenses related to meals and snacks served to children in the program. An example would be any service agreement with a vendor that you have to provide meals. Excuse me. 5E, F are travel, insurance, utilities, legal, and other operating expenditures. Equipment is category 6,400. This is expenditures for movable personal property, including equipment such as vehicles, machinery, computer systems, and playground equipment. Equipment replacement is category 6,500. and this is expenditures for equipment replaced on a piece-for-piece basis. The expenditures must be identified for purposes of the calculation of the current expense of Education Code, Section 41372. Not depreciation or use allowance, taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which may be claimed as part of the actual and allowable costs for buildings or building improvements related to the Child Development Program and equipment necessary for the operation of the program. Costs can be charged for an item that would normally fall under categories 1,000 through 5,000, but is listed in these line items because it cannot be separately identified. Costs may not exceed 10% of the total categories of 1,000 through 5,000, and LEAs shall use the CDE-approved rate that is less than 10%. And the expense we have is administrative costs. These costs incurred for administrative activities where neither the family nor the child directly benefits from activity. This is any indirect costs and is limited to 15% of the total contract. Okay, so let's review revenue overview, restricted and unrestricted income. Revenue received to support the Child Development Program can come from multiple sources. Revenue categorized as either restricted or unrestricted income, depending on the source and how it is expended. Income for both certified and non-certified children must be reported. Restricted income is income that may only be expended for specific limited purposes. An example is Child Nutrition Program, which is received from the CDE Nutrition Services Division for the Child and Adult Care Food Program, CSPP, National School Lunch Program, NSLP, and School Breakfast Program, SBP. Restricted income could also be family fees for certain children or interest earned on apportionment. Restricted income is income that the donor has not restricted for use for certified children or income the donor has restricted for purposes that are not reimbursable to the contract. Income for services to children not subsidized by the contract. This would be for parent fees for non-certified children, donations, and grants, or fundraising. Other income is funds needed to run your program in addition to the amount requested, and it may be a combination of both restricted and unrestricted income. New sources for other income include general funds, donations and grants, fundraising, or parent fees for non-certified children. Now this over to Kimmy, who is going to go over the budget pages.
We will now go over the budget pages. Much of the budget pages are going to auto-populate from the previous forms that we discussed just a few minutes ago. The pages are on worksheet A4 and are on 2 pages for this RFA. However, for demonstration purposes, we have broken them down into 4 separate sections: B, C, and D. In the RFA, sections A and B are on page 1, and sections C and D are on page 2. Here we go, column A, the proposed budget plan. So beginning with column A are some definitions that are helpful when you are filling out the rest of the budget pages. To make it clear that these numbers are not actual numbers, this is only for demonstration purposes. Starting 1, certificate salaries, we have $64,575. Classified salaries of $659,130. Employee benefits of $210,489. Books and supplies of $25,763. 5, however, is a combination of line 5A through 5F as shown below. As such, line A, rent and lease, is $58,364. Line E has no amount in there. Line E is nutrition of $75,000. Line D is travel of $4,350. Line E other expenses of $27,560. Those total amounts equal the line 5 amount of $165,274. When you enter the 5A through 5F amounts, they will automatically total in line 5. Next, we have line 6, new equipment, that is $7,500, and line 7, equipment replacement of $3,000 for a total budget of $1,135,731. This is the amount that you are anticipating spending to operate the programs you are applying for. The next item is total administrative costs. That is $146,121. Next is column B of the budget pages. Everything here except for one line is auto-populated from the previous worksheet. This one is to calculate the certified percentage and the certified budget amount. The first line is the adjusted certified enrollment, and this is auto-populated from worksheet A3, full day summary, 16,277.9766. Next line, adjusted non-certified enrollment, is also auto-populated, and that is from worksheet A2, full day non-certified enrollment of 37. That 37 is then multiplied by the proposed days of operation, which was listed as 249 on worksheet A3, to arrive at the total annual adjusted non-certified child days of enrollment of 9,213. Next is total enrollment. Total enrollment is the combination of both the certified enrollment and the non-certified enrollment. In this case, it is 25,490.9766. Next, line 4, where we are going to determine the percentage of certified enrollment. The certified percentage is used to calculate the portion of the budget which may be reimbursed through the CSPP program. We start with a total adjusted certified enrollment of 16,277.9766, 1A above, and then a total enrollment of 20,490.9766 from 3A above. Adjusted enrollment divided by the total enrollment to arrive at the percentage of total certified enrollment of 53.86%. Next, we go to line 5, which is the proration of the budget for certified enrollment. We take the budget total from column A, number 11, of $1,135,731, and we subtract the nutrition costs. We were estimating $55,000, which will be paid through the federal and state nutrition programs. Therefore, $55,000 is reduced off the $1,135,731 budget total to arrive at the subtotal of $1,080,731. That $1,080,731 is then multiplied by the percent of certified enrollment to obtain a certified budget portion of $690,131. Now to column C. This is worksheet A4, page 2. This calculates the state contract portion needed to run the program. The first line is the total adjusted certified enrollment from column B, line 1A. Again, all of the amounts are auto-populated. That amount is $16,277.9766. That is applied by daily rate of $45.73 to arrive at a maximum reimbursement of $744,392. This is what was calculated on worksheet A3, total funds requested. Now we have the certified budget portion from column B, line 5C, of $690,131. We compare the maximum reimbursement amount to the certified budget portion and then determine which one is less. In this case, the certified budget portion of $690,131 is lesser amount, and that is what is selected for line item 3. Next, go to column D, which is their income needed to operate the program. We have budget total from column A, line 11 of $1,135,731. We have the lesser of the two amounts on column C, which happened to be the $690,131. Next is other income needed of $145,600. This is the other income that is needed for non-certified children in the program. The section lists the places where that income is going to be derived from. We have nutrition program revenue of $65,000, parent fees for non-certified children at $426,800, and donation and grants of $16,725, which total $508,525,000, which is more than adequate to cover the other income needed of $445,600. Next, I'm going to go over some reminders for completing the RFA fiscal form. The following forms are site-specific and must be duplicated for each site. You can do this by right the tab, select Move or Copy, select Create a Copy, and click OK. Worksheet A1's full day, full year form, certified enrollment information and funds requested, and Worksheet B1, part day, part year form, certified enrollment information and funds requested. The forms are summary pages. Only one copy of the specific worksheet is needed for all sites. Worksheet 2, full day form, non-certified children. Worksheet 2, part day form, non-certified children. Worksheet A3, full day form, site summary information. Worksheet B3, day form, site summary information. Worksheet A4, full day form, projected annual program budget. And Worksheet B4, part day form, projected annual program budget. If you are applying for part day, part year funding, you will need to submit the part day, part year forms. These forms are completed in the same manner as full day, full year forms. This is, in the part day, part year forms, is that the minimum days of operation is 175 to 180 days. The part adjustment factor of 0.693 is used to convert the contracted full day rate to the part day rate. These adjustment factors are found on Worksheet B1 and Worksheet B2. Now look at information regarding service level exemption, also known as startup allowance. A or expanding programs may not have sufficient enrollment during the first contract period while the program is starting up, but will incur costs that are reimbursable expenses. Education Code Section 8275 and Title V, Section 18034, allows up to 15% of the annualized award amount to be paid for startup costs without providing services. It is additional funding, but is part of the total contract award. The amount may include, but not limited to, the following costs: employment and orientation of necessary staff, setting up a program and facility, cessation of rental agreements and the making of necessary deposits, the purchase of a reasonable inventory of materials and supplies, or the purchase of an initial premium for insurance. The total allowance cannot exceed 15% of the annualized award amount. Startup costs can only be expended in the fiscal year they are approved. Unfunded funds cannot be transferred to a subsequent fiscal year. Jobs awarded require fiscal and audit reporting as specified in the funding terms and conditions. For non-LEAs, equipment purchases or renovation costs in excess of $7,500 per purchase will require 3 bids and shall be approved in writing in advance by the CDE. LEA's equipment purchases and renovations costs exceeding $5,000 must have at least 3 bids or estimates submitted to ESD for approval. The procurement should be consolidated, and subdividing equipment purchases into separate items to avoid the bidding or approval requirements is prohibited. This is an example of the request for service level exemption startup allowance. This is also known as a line item budget. I do point out the first 2 lines. The first line is total amount of funds requested in this application, which happens to be $704,392. Line 2 is the total amount requested as startup, which is up to 15% of that $744,392 amount. In this case, it is $111,659. These you will have manually enter. Next is where you're going to describe and break down the items that you're requesting on your startup allowance. Just as an example of what kind of detail we're looking for, on this line it says 2 teachers at $20 per hour at 80 hours equals $3,200. Kind of details what we need. Also, if for instance you are buying computers, we would like to know what computers are going to be used for and who would use them, the sorts of details. Anything that will be able to help us in determining the appropriateness of this request. So on the last 2 lines, besides playground equipment, is $25,000 and bathroom remodel is $60,908. Examples of what need prior approval because they are above the $7,500 threshold. The next is the budget narrative justification. This is where you're going to explain what you are purchasing and why you're purchasing it. Items will be reviewed to ensure the request is reasonable and necessary. In terms and conditions, again, we are mentioning that equipment purchases and repairs exceeding $7,500 for LEAs and non-LEAs will require approval from ESD prior to any purchase made. Next, we will get into how contract payments will be made. Contract apportionments will only be dispersed when a formal contract between the CE and the agency has been fully executed. A contract is executed only after both parties have signed the contract. Contractors are required to sign and mail 2 copies of the contract to the CE's contract office. Contract office then signs and executes the contract. Contractors will receive a copy of the executed contract. Applicants are advised that reimbursement will not be provided for any costs incurred out the specific contract period. The CDE recommends that agencies have 3 months of operating capital available to administer all contracted programs for the period prior to receiving state contract payments for Child Development and Nutrition Fiscal Services Unit, CDNFS. Capital may be necessary because of 1, a late budget approved by legislature and signed by the governor's office, or 2, delays in the execution of the contract. 3 months of operating capital is approximately 1/4 of the agency's total annual maximum reimbursable amount. Examples of acceptable operating capital would include, but are limited to, cash or line credit. CDFS is responsible for generating contract payments. These are adjusted to correspond to the projected amount earned or expended by the contractor through the end of the contract period. After the apportionment process, CDFS approves an apportionment if a contractor has met all terms. For this contract, the initial apportionment is usually 25% of the MRA. Minimum monthly apportionments are based upon apportionment schedule. The City's accounting office will bill payment with the State Controller's office, and the State Controller's office will produce and mail the warrant to the contractor. The apportionment process can take between 4 to 6 weeks before the warrant is received by a contractor in the mail. Here we have additional information on how contract payments are made. First, we have the limits of reimbursement from Title V, Section 18054A, which states contracts will be reimbursed on the lesser of reimbursable costs or service earnings. So, family fees for certified children and earned interest are subtracted calculating the contractor's payment. The payment amount. Any costs incurred before the stated effective date in a fully executed contract are not reimbursable expenditures. State tax funds must be spent on reimbursable startup costs and or reimbursable costs for eligible children during the contract period. CDE may recoup any payments made for costs which are reasonable and necessary, and is entitled to recover any cost of recoupment. Claims of reimbursement shall not be paid unless there are adequate documents to support the claim. The contractor has the burden of supporting claims for reimbursement. Next, we will have a list of some contacts and the reason why you would contact them. First, have the Early Education and Support Division, ESD. You will contact them for contract applications, program assistance, compliance reviews, statistical reports, and appeals. These contacts are Joycelyn Ward-Richardson, Crystal Devlin, Deborah Rawson, and Jonathan Yang. To the Audits and Investigation Division, you will contact them for audit requirements, audit reviews, and delinquent audits. Next, have the Contracts Office. You will contact them for contract content, contract status, signed contracts, or missing contracts. Lastly, we have Child Development, Nutrition, and Fiscal Services Division, CNFS. You will contact the appropriate fiscal analyst, and you will contact them for contract terms, attendance, and fiscal reports, reimbursement calculations, reserve account status, payment authorization, contract billing, checks, delinquent accounts receivable, and technical assistance. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Bill Wright.
A couple hints for you here. The application due date is for Tuesday, December 19th, 2017 by 5 p.m. Completion of all information and applications correctly. Signatures, narrative section, and formatting. For questions regarding the RFA, please submit questions by email to csppRFA@ce.ca.gov. Also, this webinar should be available on our website within 2 weeks. Thank you much for who listened and hanging in there with us. Please, with your application, just so there's no question, these applications require a lot of work and it can be very time-consuming. Please use a messenger or tracking system. We encourage that you cover your application so we avoid any lost or delayed applications. If we have not answered any of your questions, please go to the website I referred you to email us your questions. Thank you very much for all who have participated.